and perfected the one-day remodeling experience so you can enjoy your new bathroom faster than ever before. It's a worry-free bath remodel from the most trusted brand name in the business, Jacuzzi. For a virtual or in-home appointment, call 800-826-9895. That's 800-826-9895. 800-826-9895.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show on KCAA. We'll be right back after this message from our sponsor, Teamsters 1932, a strong union with 14,000 members in the IE. Go to Teamsters1932.org for more information. Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting Teamsters1932.org/organize to start today.
Located in the heart of San Bernardino, California, the Teamsters Local 1932 Training Center is designed to train workers for high-demand, good-paying jobs in various industries throughout the Inland Empire. If you want a pathway to a high-paying job and the respect that comes with a union contract, visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org. Are you looking for a good union job? The Inland Empire's 14,000 member strong Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get working people trained and placed in open positions in public service clerical work and in jobs in the logistics industry. This is a new opportunity to advance your career and raise standards across the region. Visit 1932trainingcenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingcenter.org.
You're tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about. What a good day I had today. I went to go see President Biden give his speech in Philadelphia at the AFL-CIO's convention. Good speech, very happy with it, but did the most Joe Biden thing that I could think of today, and that was I rode the Amtrak rail lines. And, you know, I love public transit. I wish we had more of it. I wish it was more accessible, especially in the area of the country that I live in. But if I'm going to Philly, I'm going to New York, I'm jumping on the Amtrak train because, well, it was great. No traffic, no parking, no fuss, no muss. It was fabulous. I had just incredible conversations both there and back. It was a good day. It was a good day. In fact, the president gave what I thought was an outstanding speech. Need to hear more of Joe Biden talking about what he talked about today to the working folks at the AFL-CIO's convention, talking about the jobs that we're creating, the mess. And I think he doesn't do this enough because I think Democrats are kind of a little shy of talking about what they've done. Inherited a mess, a real mess. He went into some of the job numbers, 8.7 million jobs created in his 16 months. That's impressive stuff. You go, oh, but Rick, no, that's just COVID stuff. No, jobs came back. 390,000 in the last month, 600,000 manufacturing jobs, unemployment down to 3.7%. And he went into something I thought was really important. People are leaving jobs to go get other jobs to make more money. And oh, what a shame. And I love the way he put, oh, what a shame. Employers are going to have to compete for workers by paying them more. Oh, what a shame. Because, Biden's old enough to remember, like my grandparents were, where if someone didn't treat you right, you went across the street. There were enough jobs for that. We didn't have such a highly centralized economy where, big corporations controlled so much of everything. And, he did, look, he went and he talked about some of the major accomplishments, talked about buying American, making it a reality, not a slogan. And I thought rightly so, went into saying, look, we cleaned up a mess. The last guy had massive deficits. We're cutting deficits. Now, look, I'm not so sure that's a great idea. We can disagree with that. Economically, that's the right thing to be doing at the right time, especially as inflation is eating away at working people's paychecks. But the idea that we're on a different track, that transforming the economy, and as he was talking, I'm hearing my conservative, yeah, you're transforming the economy. He hit on an interesting point. And we like to think that inflation's only hurting us. And look, it's hurting all of us. All of us in the working class are being harmed by this. But he hit it. He goes, look, inflation's global. And we're not getting it the worst. Now, China's saying, well, we're not getting it that bad. I believe nothing coming out of China. But I was looking at some of the statements. They said, man, he's got to get out there and do more of it. He's got to go more after the Republicans and saying, look, everything that we want to do to help bring down costs on working families, you're against. Lowering prescription drug prices, against. Helping with child care, against. All of the things that were in the Build Back Better plan, they're against. Now, look, would I have done Build Back Better differently? Absolutely. But talking about transforming our economy in ways that harken back to my grandparents' generation, his generation, I think is transformational. I think it's a good thing. But he did point out that gas has gone up $1.74 a gallon since Putin invaded Ukraine. And I don't think we talk about that enough. I know we talk about the gouging of the oil companies. I know we talk about that a lot because it's happening. But I don't think we talk about the big picture stuff, the supply chain stuff that's been decades in the making. The fact that what's going on in Ukraine is a global driver of inflation, not just with energy, but also with food. Now, he did get into some muddled bit about, trying to get the food out of Ukraine, and the rail lines are different than the rest of Europe, and building temporary silos. And he lost people there for a couple of minutes because that's kind of convoluted and difficult. But they're trying. And this is the important part of all this. He's got to get out there and hammer these messages and do it in the way that he was comfortable today in front of those folks at the AFL-CIO, his people, his home, where he working steps. I just thought the speech was well received. It was well given, and hit on the points that needed to be done. Look, we need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need to do things in a way that benefits working people for a change. And it's what I've been saying for all the 17 years I've been doing this show. It's the reason that I voted for Joe Biden. To answer that question, what good is an economy if it doesn't make lives better? What good's an economy if it doesn't make working people's lives better? If all we're doing is enriching the billionaire class. He talked about reminding people of the cars and the nice cars that were lining up to get boxes of food put in their trunk. An auto food line, if you will. While at the same time, you've got miles long car lines of working families needing help during the pandemic. You're creating more billionaires. And how a system like that is inherently unfair. And I think you need to be talking about that. Because I think Americans are drawn to things that are fair. ultimately it's going to come down to whether we can have conversations and talk about this stuff in bigger terms than sound bites and slogans. And one of the great things about being around people, especially in confined spaces like on trains or at conventions, is that you have to talk to each other. You have to have conversations, and you have to have give and take. And man, we need this. We need it in this moment to be able to converse and to share ideas and to solve problems. So for me, today was a good day. I got lots to get to today, lots I want to talk about, lots of information from the AFL-CIO convention. Tomorrow is going to be their last day. Out of this, a big organizing opportunity, a big organizing campaign, as they're going to look to make lives better. And this is, for me, what being part of a union is about. It's about better wages, hours, conditions, about opportunities. It's about, I was telling someone today, I'm a kid who grew up in a housing project. I'm a kid who grew up poor. I'm a kid who remembers the end of the month there being no food there. I'm a kid who remembers, going to, to school carnivals and not being able to play the games because never had any money. I remember being the kid who never got to do things because we were broke. I remember having hand-me-down everythings. And I now live in a neighborhood with doctors and lawyers. My kids will never see the kind of poverty, the kind of desperation, the kind of want that I grew up around. And that was always my goal. Before we had children, I waited till I was 35 till we had kids. And it was that my kids will never see the things or have to suffer the indignities or however you want to put that I did. And I want that kid growing up in that same housing project to have the same opportunities that I've had, the same chance, the same shot, to work hard, to play by the rules, to get ahead. And part of that's through the labor movement. Part of that is making jobs that are for people who are going to be able to support themselves, to support their families, to have real freedom. And this is one of those things that the left does not talk about. And it's infuriating that the left doesn't talk about it. The freedom of having some economic power. The freedom to know that your kids aren't going to go hungry. The freedom to know that you've got health security. The freedom that you know that at some point you're going to have retirement security. I have friends on the far right who, for them, freedom is about the right to buy a gun. That's their freedom. They're going to, for my cold dead hands, that's my freedom. And you go, but, if you can't afford to put food on the table, if you can't afford to buy the bullets, if you can't afford to do anything else, what freedom do you have? And if you're convicted of a crime stealing food to feed your family, they take your gun, so you don't really have the kind of freedom you think you do. And for me, I think the left has got to reclaim those words. And that patriotism of making better lives, of striving for a better future. And opportunity. Hard work should be rewarded without question. And this is something conservatives used to believe in. And it's something that they used to be behind. If we had true conservatives again, and I think they're out there, I think they're hiding right now, but if we had them, I think things could get done. But sadly, we're in this weird kind of world where we're focused more on what divides us than what puts us together. Because look, I was at the AFL's convention. Understand, there's a lot of division there. As much as they want to put forth a unified front, there's a lot of division there. You've got one sect that wants to go full bore this way. You've got another sect that wants to go full bore the other way. And there's turmoil, potentially. Now the new leadership's going to have interesting waters to bear. And we'll see if they're up for it. I'm hopeful. I'm supportive of them. I see their vision. I think it is, in the moment, a good vision to go forward. We need to be organizing more people. We need to be rowing in the same direction. We need to be fighting for better wages, opportunity, wages, hours, conditions, and opportunities. Absolutely. But we also need to be fighting for those things of equality and ending injustice. Just my thoughts. I got a lot to get to. Going to take a quick break. Back after this with some more thoughts. You got a question? You got a comment? Make sure you shoot me an email. You can do that at rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of our program, make sure you download the podcast. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. But never miss an episode. Get it wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I met this guy who was his job at the convention was he ran the flight simulator for the pilots union. And, going through, what kind of training pilots have to go through, and, talking about, all the different scenarios they run through. And it's really fascinating. Your labor gets, sometimes hit with the label of being a Luddite, that, they're afraid of change. This convention was hugely different. Every one of the building trades had, some kind of, techie device that they were using to help assist their members and help assist in jobs and to be more productive and for better training opportunities and better learning. It was fabulous stuff. But the pilots had this flight simulator I got to play with for like 45 minutes. It was fabulous. But the guy was really interesting because he had all of this. He was from Taiwan. He's lived in multiple places throughout the world, and I find those kind of folks who have different global perspectives fascinating. And so we had this long, really, it was an hour and a half conversation after I got out of the flight simulator about the political realities, and he's ultra conservative, far right, and stated that right from the beginning. And I said, look, I'm probably much further to the left than you're comfortable with, and we had a rational conversation. And oddly enough, there was an enormous amount of common ground and understanding once you started to explain things. And he was at the beginning vehemently anti-union, until I began explaining the hows and the whys and the reason things happen the way they do. And he was going, well, there are rules and I can't do things, and you have to have members do this. I go, see, you're blaming the workers for a scenario that the company agreed to. Understand, you walked into someone's relationship as an outsider. There's a relationship that the company and the workforce agreed to. Why would you throw yourself in the middle of someone's marriage? And it's really what it is. I often find it fascinating that people would want to destroy something that works like that. Contracts are nothing but relationships. You agree to something, we agree to something, and we live with those, and we work to make them better, and we work to make them more productive. because everyone wants to succeed. Everyone wants to do better. And he had it in his head, a lot of the kind of stereotypes that the National Right to Work Foundation, the Chamber of Commerce, all of the vehemently anti-union groups throw out there. You can never fire a union member. And you go, yeah, you can. And he walked me through a number of scenarios where he believed that you couldn't fire the union member. And in every one of the scenarios that he brought up, it was because of lazy management. It was because they didn't follow the rules. They didn't follow the due process. And I said, look, all unions want are you to follow due process. At-will employment is over. You don't get to be a dictator. But you do have to follow a process. And if you're lazy about it, if you're stupid about it, if you don't know what you're doing, then you shouldn't be able to fire someone willy-nilly for any reason. And interestingly enough, and this is the part where I was kind of shocked, at the end of it, he goes, that's probably not a bad system. And I'll tell you, I was given the reality of the world that we live in, when people stake their flag in the ground, I'm ultra this. To have someone go, you've explained something to me, you've explained the reasons why, you've explained the hows, it makes sense. Because he didn't understand why the union would fight for someone who does something wrong. And I said, it's the same reason in society. If someone breaks the law, they have the right to an attorney. It's the same thing. Unions have a legal responsibility to represent their members. They have to do it, whether they want to or not. They have a legal responsibility to do that. And they do. They do it the best they can. Just like a criminal defense lawyer is going to vigorously defend a client. It's the same thing. Now, if the employer doesn't do what they're supposed to do to ensure that the evidence is there, or if you don't bring what you're supposed to or document what you're supposed to, then you're the problem. You're breaking things down. And he goes, that's not a bad system. I wish I would have known that earlier. And I think this is where talking to people is so important. Because understand, and this is where I went and said, look, nobody wants to have the lazy guy with them, because that means they have to do more work to pick up for the lazy guy. This idea that unions protect the lazy is ridiculous. But it's what they want to sell it, because it's divisive. It's supposed to tear us apart. It's supposed to make us not like each other and blame each other. They do it on purpose. It's focus group tested, think tank approved. They've been doing it for decades, knowing that we're not going to talk to each other. Well, this guy and I, we had a very long, productive conversation on a whole wide array of topics. And when you sit down with the understanding that, we're not going to yell at each other, not going to call each other names, not going to say, you're stupid, and listen, maybe there's a chance. Maybe there's a chance. Not on the gun issue. Look, he was very clear on the gun issue. He's got a guy. Second Amendment guy, doesn't think we should ban any guns. And then we started talking about, should we ban, fully automatic? Well, we've already done that. I go, well, you said we don't ban any guns. Oh, well, that goes without saying. No, it doesn't. Now, he made a very good point, like Joe Walsh made the other night, last night. There's so many of these AR-15s. What do you do with them? And that's a question to have a conversation around. But we should be having these conversations. And I don't know that we are, at least not as a public. And I'm concerned about the future, because I'm looking at what's being done to us. And it's not good. And we've got to get back to the bar rooms. We've got to get back to the street corners. We've got to get back to sitting and looking at each other and understanding each other. Because I'm concerned about the future. I'm hopeful. And I listened to the president speak today, like I said. I think some of the policies that he's moved forward through, The infrastructure plan to rebuild our infrastructure to help move us into a new economy and to help give us opportunities. I think it's a good move. I think it's something we should have been doing for years. I think some of the spending we're doing is helpful. I wish we had more investment in new technology and new energy policy. It's not where we are right now. I had someone ask me, well, what do you like about him? I go, I like the fact that we're really talking about progressive policies in a serious way, like we've never done before. There's always been lip service, but we've never actually discussed them. We've never actually considered them. We've never actually had a plan to move forward on them. Now there's actually people in the rooms talking about, hey, how do we do this? And I had some people today bring up the fact that, look, we can't go to all electric cars right now. We can't go to solar panels all right now. Because where are we gonna source the lithium, the cobalt? Where are we gonna do all this stuff from? Do we have that plan? How are we gonna dispose of things? Again, lots of questions, lots of things that need to be addressed. And you get that stuff by having the conversations. And this is where I'm hoping again. I'm hopeful that we can go back to this, because I miss having good, honest, spirited conversations with friends. Maybe once the Trump stuff is over. I hope. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think. Or am I just crazy? Did I just lose my mind for a day? One train ride and I've already lost it? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Again, remember, if you miss any of the program, podcast, get that wherever you get your podcasts. Quick break, right back after this with Stephen Greenhouse, labor journalist, former New York Times labor journalist. Back after this.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day John L. Lewis called miners who worked for Little Steel coal subsidiaries out on strike. It was an act of solidarity as conditions worsened on steel strike picket lines. The walkout was designed to force the closure of steel mills by stopping the flow of coal. 10,000 workers in as many as 19 mines owned by Republic Steel, Bethlehem Steel, and Youngstown Sheet and Tube dropped their tools. Bethlehem had not been one of the independent steel companies initially included in the Little Steel strike, but workers at its Cambria works in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, walked out in sympathy with railroad workers at Bethlehem-owned Blacklick and Conemaugh Railroad. They had been refused a contract. Striking miners in Johnstown marched to Cambria Works to join the 7-mile stretch of picket lines. In Ohio, the Canton Federation of Labor voted unanimously for a general strike if the newly formed Citizens League attempted to force reopening of the steel mills. SWAC leader Van Bittner threatened to call out another 600,000 miners by week's end if the strike was not settled. John L. Lewis remarked, quote, "Labor is menaced by the force of arms of Republic Steel Corporation. Labor is calling attention to this situation so the law, government, or public opinion can begin functioning before another massacre takes place." UAW President Homer Martin added, quote, "It is our purpose to spread the light of democracy to every part of this land until autocracy and industrial slavery have been driven from the country." But Johnstown civic leaders and town officials had formed a citizens committee and prepared for battle as the miners approached. It seemed there was no end to the anti-strike violence. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
It's over. Biden's numbers are in the ditch. Democrats are doomed, called the priest. These are Democrats talking. Even before November's congressional elections are run, many conventional-thinking Democratic operatives are surrendering to a presumed Republican sweep. You don't need a political science degree to know that if you start out announcing that you'll lose, chances are you will. After all, who wants to vote for a party that shows no fighting spirit, no confidence in the appeal of its own ideas? What's happening here is that the party's top leaders have decided their candidates can't win in rural areas and smaller factory cities, so they've quit trying. Worse, they blame the voters, claiming that Trumpism, Fox News BS, and culture war nonsense have poisoned the minds of people, quote, out there. Thus, party leaders have retreated from the countryside to focus entirely on big urban areas. Democratic congressional leaders even killed their rural outreach programs, and the party's chairman in 2018 meekly declared, "You can't door knock in rural America." Actually, sir, you can. And if you choose to abandon this working class constituency, surprise, it will abandon you. Worse than failing to campaign along America's dirt roads and factory streets, National Democrats have actively been pushing corporate policies that have ravaged families living there, including trade scams sucking out union jobs, shamefully bailing out Wall Street bankers who crashed our real economy while ignoring millions of devastated workaday people, and doing nothing about the corporate-caused farm depression still ripping across our land. Washington Democrats have largely betrayed this vital constituency. This is Jim Hightower saying, did party poobahs think voters wouldn't notice or care how they're being treated? If we want them back on our side, then let's go to them and get back on their side.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, lots of good stuff at the convention of the AFL-CIO. The president spoke today, and look, I like the speech. It hit a lot of the important parts. I'm hoping coming out of this convention, the organizing that needs to happen. I know Liz Shuler and Fred Redmond have a plan that they're going to attempt to move forward on, and the hope is that they actually do that. And one of the people who's been calling for a more active labor movement to get out and do the hard work of organizing, the hard work of getting out into the streets and rebuilding the working class of this country is my next guest, who is one of the best labor journalists in the country, former New York Times labor journalist and author of numerous books on labor. His most recent is Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor, available wherever you get your book stuff. That's why I've asked Stephen Greenhouse to come talk with us. Stephen, thanks for taking some time for us.
Nice to be here, Rick.
So let's start with the big convention. You've been to a bunch of these, as have I. Thoughts of this one?
So this is the first time the AFL-CIO has a female president. That's very exciting. Liz Shuler, the president, really tries to run things by consensus. There's much less infighting, much less nastiness between union leaders. I've seen some really nasty meetings. I've seen, the famous AFL-CIO convention where the SCIO and Teamsters quit the convention. I was at another meeting where two of the nation's most famous union presidents were screaming at the top of their lungs against each other because they said each was raiding the other's territory. This is a much more peaceful convention. Shuler, I think, has really gotten people to pull together, to back Biden, to back the Democrats, to try doing more organizing, because she sees, that there's a lot of excitement about organizing out there, and she's trying to line up, the herd, the cats, the herd, the 57 unions in the AFL-CIO together to say, hey, folks, we have to do more unionizing.
Yeah, and look, there was no intrigue, there was no drama. In fact, the election was over before I even got there, because there really wasn't one. You knew who the winner was going to be. This was really a coronation. It was really about, hey, how are we going to now pick the ball up and move forward? And I think that's for this moment, I think that was important.
No, I agree. The death of Richard Trumka, famous, the former head of the AFL-CIO, famous Pennsylvania native, former coal miner. That was a huge blow, and Shuler really did have to pick up the pieces. And whereas, Trumka was, a very charismatic, combative guy, Shuler is more of a, consensus, just kind of as a gentler speaker. And she's really trying to get everyone to pull together. And, I guess the dispute now is like, okay, there's this huge wave of organizing at Starbucks. There's this historic union victory at Amazon. There are all these, graduate students unionizing and adjunct professors unionizing and museum workers unionizing and nurses unionizing. What should the AFL-CIO do? What should its 57 unions do to help? And so she announced what she said was a bold plan that the AFL-CIO's 57 unions will seek to unionize 1 million members over the next 10 years. And that's, she says that's important. We're putting out a firm, realistic goal. I interviewed several union presidents who say, it's nice to put a number out there. It's nice to have a goal, but 1 million ain't nearly enough. It would mean, less than 1% annual growth for unions, and they think unions should remain higher. And Schuler kind of says, look, unions have a hard time not losing, hard time because they're losing so many members, and there could be recessions, there could be factory closing, so it's hard to add 1 million on a net basis. But when you speak to some of the leftier, more activist union leaders, they say, 1 million just isn't enough. That if we're going to really increase the percentage of workers of unions from the current 10%, which is down from 20%, 25% in the 1980s, it's really important to try to organize millions of workers. And look, there's more enthusiasm, and as you've noted in your shows, Rick, there's more enthusiasm about unions right now than there has been in decades. I mean, what's happening at Starbucks, what's happening at Amazon, the REI victory, the unions, the efforts to unionize several Apple stores, Microsoft announcing that it will agree to union neutrality, that it won't fight against unions. I mean, that's all important stuff. And all these public opinion polls show, 77% of young Americans 18 to 34 approve of unions. And this amazing study I saw saying that 74%, 3 in 4 workers aged 18 to 24, 3 in 4 of them say they would vote to join a union today if they could. Like that really, there's a lot of excitement out there among young people for unions. And that makes me think, with a little inspiration and lots more perspiration, the AFL-CIO, the nation's unions, could organize a lot more than 1 million people if they really, put their old shoulder to the grindstone.
Yeah, and that comes with investment. That comes with, with having, that kind of push. But it also comes with, I still go back to, you need to have some legislative reforms. You still need to have a structure that's going to make that a little bit easier. Because I still remember stories from my grandparents. It wasn't this difficult for their generation to organize back in the 50s and 60s.
No, you're absolutely right, Rick. And thanks for reminding me of that. So, American corporations, starting probably in the 1970s, really gearing up in the 80s, got much, much, much more aggressive in fighting against unions. And some union leaders I speak to say very rationally that, hey, it's easy to say we should organize more, but don't forget how hellishly difficult it is taking on extraordinarily anti-union companies like Walmart and Target and Amazon and Starbucks. And, the amazing things now is like this youth-fueled, youth-filled, youth-driven enthusiasm for unions. It has often been able to surmount, to overcome this huge anti-union opposition by these companies. So that's why some people are saying, this organizing by these young workers, this self-organizing, this worker-to-worker organizing goes far to overcome the biggest argument that companies put forward in saying you shouldn't join a union. Companies often say, unions are a third party, they're greedy, they don't represent you, they just represent yourselves. But when it's, when you're an Amazon worker and your co-workers are leading the movement, when you're a Starbucks worker and your co-workers are leading the movement, when you're an Apple worker and your co-workers are leading the movement, you realize, hey, a union is us. The union is my buddies who are sticking their necks out to try to improve our wages and our conditions, and that it's BS when the boss says a union is a third party. So I think, these very smart young organizers have developed a strategy that is often a winning strategy.
And I would argue, in talking to some of the Amazon workers, especially the ones at JFK 8, that they don't take the union busting silently. They push back, whereas in past times these captive audience meetings were one-sided. They've decided to take those things on, which I think is a great strategy.
It's so one of the I don't often use this word, amazing things. There are many things amazing about the victory against Amazon and Staten Island. This one with these two workers, Chris, as you've discussed, Chris Malls and Derek Palmer, they decide to take on this $1 trillion corporation with 1 million workers, and they managed to unionize this humongous 8,300 worker factory. And one of the ways they did it is they there are these anti-union meetings, the captive audience meetings that the workers have to attend, and the workers very, very bravely, very courageously stood up in the middle of the meetings and like called out the lies by the $3,000 a week anti-union consultant, saying, "Don't say that unions are a third party. I work here. Derek works here. Angela works here. And that's just a lie to say unions are a third party. The unions are us." And the anti-union consultants would say, if you unionize, we might go back to paying the minimum wage. And the workers would say that's BS. With the unemployment rate 3.6% and Amazon desperate to find enough workers, there's no way in the world it's going to cut its wages to $15. In fact, to $15 an hour. That's the New York State minimum wage, New York City minimum wage. So, and that really threw these anti-union consultants off. Sometimes they'd end the captive audience meetings immediately. Sometimes they'd start, stumbling and stuttering, and it showed that the workers had taken charge. It was very cool, if I may use the word.
And it's one of those things where you go, why did no one do that before? Because I'd always said, why don't you just get up and walk out? They can't fire all of you, but it's just one of those things that finally someone did it. You listen to the
I've interviewed a few quote unquote labor experts on to say, people in our generation, Rick, and you and I are not 25 years old, last I looked. A lot of people in their 50s and 60s, 70s, they're just more scared. They worked when the unemployment rate was higher. They had families and kids and mortgages, and were worried that they'd get fired if they stood up to the boss. But these 28-year-olds, they're bolder. They're Bernie Sanders people. They're Me Too people. They're Black Lives Matter people. They're used to standing up, and I think a lot of them are just we don't tolerate lies, and we're not going to sit here and let these people lie to us. And they discovered very smartly that you have a right protected by federal law to stand up and protest in the middle of these captive audience meetings, because if you team up with other workers to try to do things to increase pay, increase benefits, improve working conditions, that's protected under the National Labor Relations Act. So workers are discovering this, and this is spreading from one worker group to another worker group.
See, but this is that education process that needs to happen in every generation, where you rediscover those rights, you rediscover the concept of solidarity, you rediscover all of those things that generations have to discover. No?
Absolutely. I mean, so one of the amazing things, in the Starbucks campaign, so today, the 150th Starbucks store was unionized, and it's gone from one store in Buffalo 6 months ago to 150 today, and their election schedule another 120, 130, 140. That's pretty remarkable. And so there are these grizzled old 28-year-old veterans who unionized in Buffalo or unionized in Boston, and they get on the phone or get on Zoom with workers in Starbucks workers, 25-year-old Starbucks workers in Oklahoma City or Seattle or Birmingham, Alabama, or Richmond, Virginia, and they explain to them, this is how you organize your coworkers. This is, how the anti-union consultants are going to lie to you. This is how you could explain to your coworkers, these are the lies, and they shouldn't buy that stuff. And and then the internet makes it much easier, Rick. You know that. I mean, it's easier to spread information. You can spread, you can just send an email, with 4 pages of explanations of why what the anti-union consultant is saying is lies. And it's harder to do that in the 1950s and 1970s.
Yeah, well, we use the tools that are available. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show here with Stephen Greenhouse, labor journalist, former New York Times reporter, author of the book Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. You can get that wherever you get your book stuff. I hope you'll take a look at that. It's good stuff. But here, this is one of those moments where you go, what's causing this? Is it coming out of the pandemic? Is it this generation watch their parents get beat up? Is it Biden's, being the most pro-labor president in history? Is it something else? Is it all of it? Why now? It seems to be.
Rick, I think you're right. It's all of the above. I think partly it's the pandemic. A lot of workers felt bruised and beaten and mistreated during the pandemic. They felt they risked their lives. They saw during the pandemic, many corporations' profits soared, many CEOs' pay soared, and they thought, we're not even getting hero pay or hazard pay of an extra few dollars an hour. And yes, finally, I got a raise of 4%, but inflation was 8%, while the CEO's pay went up $3 million or 17%. And so they feel mistreated during the pandemic. I think they feel, again, they see other young workers standing up. They're very inspired by what happened at Amazon and very inspired by what happened at Starbucks. They see, people they went to college with unionizing in graduate school. They see, we have the most pro-union president, one of the most pro-union president, certainly the most pro-union president since Franklin Roosevelt, and some people say the most pro-union president ever. And I think a lot of young workers, as I said, they're inspired by Bernie Sanders. They're involved in Me Too. They're involved in Black Lives Matter. They're involved in Fight for 15, and they've been fighting. They've been standing up, and they're not ready to take it from the man. They're not ready to take it from corporations. Plus, again, there's a lot of student debt, so that if you're making, $15 or $18 an hour, that might still make it very hard to pay back your student loans. Yeah. We've all read about housing costs are soaring. If you're a 40-year-old making $70,000 a year, you could afford a house much more easily than a 23-year-old who, maybe is still forced to live with mommy and daddy because they're not earning enough. And they say, that's unfair. And they read about all the income inequality, and they see the ads on TV about, buy this car or take this trip, and they can't afford it. And they say, something's broken here. And I think there are, probably 10, 15, 20 good reasons why there's this surge right now.
Yeah, and I would say it's also, back when the big collapse happened in 2008, I was hoping for a kind of a rebirth, but we hadn't laid the groundwork yet. You hadn't had a couple of generations, a couple of cycles of organizing. We went through the Occupy Wall Street, which I've got friends who say Occupy Wall Street was a failure, and I'm like, I don't think so. I think it was the seeds that brought most of this stuff to bear. And the same thing with the occupation in Wisconsin and the fights that went on there. I think when people start to do those kind of things, it becomes the next thing that comes along, and it grows.
Right. That's it. I mean, Occupy Wall Street didn't achieve its goals, but where it was humongously successful is it got the American people thinking and talking about economic inequality and the 1% and 99%. And it really helps set the stage for the 515 and a lot of consciousness about income inequality. So it really has in ways had this underlying pervasive effect, I think.
So did you get to see the president's speech today?
Yeah, I saw the president's. Well, one more thought. I think another thing is our government is so broken. It has such a hard time doing what's needed on voting laws to improve child care or improve health coverage. I think a lot of like labor leaders in the 1950s, they think we're not going to get what we need from the government, so we got to do it ourselves in the private sector through unions. I think that might be going through some workers' minds. Joe Biden, I thought, gave a very good worker-oriented speech today. I spoke to a union leader afterwards, and he said, that's the message that I think all Democrats should be adopting. He was talking about how, corporations and the rich aren't paying their fair share. Many of them aren't paying taxes, that billionaires pay only 8%, effective 8% income tax rate, which is much higher than school teachers and much lower than school teachers and steelworkers pay. And he was saying, the system is in many ways broken, and I'm the president and I want to fix it, but guess who's preventing me from fixing it? The Republicans. And he talked about how he wants to improve child care and address student debt and pass the Protecting the Right to Organize Act to make it easier to unionize. And he talked about how important unions are to have been to build the middle class. He talked about how his infrastructure program is great. It's going to help, cities and states, and it's going to create a lot of good good union middle class jobs. And it was a very powerful blue collar message, and I think it would play very well in the Keystone State.
No, he's got to get out there and he's got to say that stuff more often, and that's where my mind was. There were a couple of tripping points, but it is what it is.
But that's the message, and he's got to stick with that.
And like, sometimes people, and I among them, say, oh, Biden's too old. He was really energetic and vigorous and forceful today. I mean, it was a good, solid speech.
I mean, he was in his element. I mean, he was home, as he said.
Yeah, I mean, he really felt comfortable talking to this crowd. He really did. Even though it wasn't in Scranton, he was still very comfortable.
Just a little couple hours south. Halfway between the Delaware and the Scranton home. Last question I've got for you. So the million number, do you think they get there, or even though it's low? Because I go, a million sounds pretty decent if you can get to it.
So a million means 100,000 a year, which means less than 1% growth a year. And when you're considering that you've been losing members, 1% growth might be very good, but the overall employment is probably going to rise faster than 1% a year, probably by 2% a year. So that even if you do the 100,000 a year, the million over 10 years, the percentage of workers in unions will still decline, which is depressing. So Liz Schuler says, we need a goal that's attainable. We need a goal that everyone will buy into. I interviewed the head of the hotel workers union and the postal workers union and the flight attendants union. And they just say, look, it's good to have a numerical goal. It's good to be focusing more on organizing, but this number just ain't high enough. And this is an amazing moment. There's more excitement about unions than have been in decades. Like, why settle for 1 million? And Liz Schuler will say, we need a realistic goal. So,
here's the thing. You can do that in the first year, and we'll set a new goal.
Right. That is true.
There's the answer. There's the response.
I interviewed Dee Taylor, head of the Hotel Workers Union, who's really a visionary labor leader. He said, the year before the pandemic, they organized 22,000 workers. They increased their membership by 7% in 1 year. And he says, more unions should be able to do that. So
I'm all in favor of it. We start with Amazon, finish off the Starbucks, keep right on rolling. But Stephen, I appreciate the time. Thanks for taking a little time from the convention.
Okay, thanks.
Give us some thoughts.
Okay, good to be with you, Rick.
Well, I love having you on. And again, this is one of those moments where I'd love to see 1 million in the next year. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Well, working people come to talk. Approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
No, Stephen's right. That million number is kind of low, and I agree. It would be great to see 2, 3, 5. It would be nice to see labor back in the numbers where my grandparents' generation, where they had built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization in about the 35% range, which meant that 35% of the workforce was unionized and earned good, solid family-sustaining wages that you could support a family on one income with health benefits, with retirement security, with that freedom that I was talking about earlier. And it meant that 35% of the workforce who didn't join unions were earning about the same, which is why you had such a broad, large middle class, because you had employers who were going, we'll pay what they're paying, just don't join a union. And people were okay with that. And it gave people options. You go, I don't want to join no stinking union. I'm going to go over there. And it gave people choices. And what we've got now is this Hunger Games scenario where they're telling people, you shouldn't have to join. You don't have to. You can go somewhere else. This is that kind of moment. And if you have a growing union movement, if you have a large working class where prosperity is shared broadly,
you have those opportunities. And I am all in favor of that. And every working person should be. You know, it's interesting. I used to have supervisors when I used to be on the negotiating committee at the one job. I'd have supervisors go in there and get a good deal. Go in there and get as much as you can. Because their bonuses and their raises and their income was dependent on what we got at the bargaining table. So if we did really well, they did really well. So the frontline supervisors were pulling for us to do even better because they knew the company was going to help fund them in kind so that they wouldn't go unionize or try and, you know, just, if you're going to be a supervisor making less money than the people you're supervising, what are you going to do? But it's those moments are being broken because the rate is falling, and this is by design. You know, they actually came up with a word for corporate power holding down wages, monsopony. It means that these corporations have so much power that they can depress wages and hold your income down. Why? So that they can have more. And this is why I always say, look, I want companies to be wildly profitable. So when we workers sit down to negotiate for those better wages, hours, and conditions, there's money to be had. Every working person should have a union card, and every working person should have a contract. Because every CEO's got one, man. It's just that simple. But I'm hoping for good things coming out of this convention. I think we all should be hoping, because their success is our success. If you work for a living, if you're someone like I believe, you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. This is how we do it. If you miss any of today's program, make sure you grab the podcast. Get that podcast wherever you get your favorites. That simple.
Nearly 80 million people under heat alerts. That's a lot of hot people.
Another early extreme heat wave shatters records across the U.S. Yellowstone National Park closed due to catastrophic flooding. Plus,
Exxon made more money than God this year.
Gas prices and profiteering hit new record highs.
All of those record highs and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
There was a headline in every website today. Gas now $5 a gallon. And everyone in L.A. went, oh, finally, some good news.
Ain't it the truth? This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, summer barely underway, but already the extreme weather is causing a problem pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. Extreme weather is ruining vacations, especially in Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming, which indefinitely closed all entrances and began evacuating some park visitors on Monday after record rainfall caused record flooding and mudslides that washed out roads, at least one bridge, and knocked out power to the park and nearby gateway communities.
So all of Yellowstone National Park closed in the middle of summer tourist season?
Yes. The rest of the nation is broiling. Another early extreme heat event shattered records in the Southwest over the weekend, with Phoenix, Las Vegas, Denver, and California's Death Valley all posting new high temperature records. Texas hit a new record for electricity demand, but its grid did hold. And it's not even peak summer yet. As we go to air, the extreme heat is intensifying and expanding eastward, with temperatures 20 to 30 degrees warmer than average from Minnesota to the eastern seaboard. Wow. So it is a great time to get prepared.
Wow, triple digits I'm seeing in Illinois, Minnesota.
Yep, climate scientists warn that extreme heat waves are growing in frequency and intensity due to global warming. And it matters because excessive heat events cause more deaths in the U.S. than all other weather-related disasters like hurricanes, floods, and tornadoes combined. Public health experts say that early extreme heat waves are especially dangerous because people are not yet acclimated to the rapid onset of high heat and high humidity. Meanwhile, gas prices have hit a new record national average of $5 a gallon, which in turn is fueling inflation. Industry experts agree that there's very little that the Biden administration can do to quickly change the market forces that have caused the surge in gasoline prices that are hitting around the world, not just in the U.S. In remarks Friday at the Port of Los Angeles, President Biden pushed back on the false narratives of the oil industry and Republicans by highlighting the oil industry's record profits and calling for a windfall profits tax.
They have 9,000 permits to drill. They're not drilling. Why aren't they drilling? Because they make more money not producing more oil. The price goes up, number one. And number two, the reason they're not drilling is they're buying back their own stock, which should be taxed, quite frankly, buying back their own stock and making no new investments.
All good points, but Desi Doyen, let me call you out. You said that gas prices are hitting an all-new high. They're not hitting that high. They have been raised to that high by the oil companies.
Excellent point.
And by the way, Republicans are all in favor of this big oil profiteering. Every Democrat in the House voted in favor of a bill to stop oil and gas profiteering. Every single Republican except 4 voted against it. They like the high prices.
I guess they do. An explosion and a fire at a liquefied natural gas export facility in Freeport, Texas is not helping energy prices. That single facility accounts for more than 20% of U.S. LNG exports and will remain closed for at least 3 weeks. That has further tightened global natural gas supplies, triggering even higher prices. And that's a double whammy for consumers because natural gas is a feedstock for fertilizer. So Russia's invasion of Ukraine has sent both food and fertilizer prices soaring. But high prices are good news for Russia. The New York Times reports that Russia pulled in record revenue from its exports of oil, gas, and coal in the first 100 days of its war in Ukraine.
See, war pays.
But some good-ish news. To cut down on the massive problem of electronic waste, the European Union has agreed to a new law imposing a standard charger for smartphones, tablets, and laptops. And finally, the Biden administration has unveiled the first ever standards for building out a national network of 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations.
KCAA Loma Linda, 1050 AM, 106.5 FM, and now 102.3 FM.
This is Gary Garver. In these trying times, many people are depressed and lost because the future of our society is up in the air. People turn to drastic measures, including the abuse of drugs and alcohol. If you're going through these troubling times and turning to substance abuse because you're feeling there is no hope